Hi, I'm Michael Hafftka. I've been an artist for 50 years. I principally create from my imagination, although I do reference a lot to reality. I believe in creation as a way of life. I think art gives meaning to people, and I search for meaning and search for meaningful subjects so that I can express things that are important for myself and for others. My creative process really is kind of like a meditation. Um, I don't know how it compares to other people because creation itself is a very personal thing. And becoming an artist is really something that, for me anyway, is just completely personal. So I could only be the kind of artist that I am. I don't compare myself to others. Now, as far as my process goes, because I don't like plans, I don't like to, I like accidents, and I like also inspiration, and I like coming up with new things as I'm doing something. So I start from something and I allow that thing to lead me anywhere. So essentially, it's kind of a free form meditation, kind of an improvisation. I let something come to me, it inspires me, I follow it, and I keep following it, and I go in every different direction that it leads me, and that at some point it becomes kind of fixed. This is what I would call the Hafka way. At some point, it becomes clear to me. Um, it becomes clear to me what to do. That doesn't mean the meaning becomes clear to me or that I know where I'm going. It just becomes clear to me to really go in a certain direction or follow this one part of a very confusing set of inspirations. And that's how a work is born. So I would say that, you know, my process has allowed me to discover myself and to discover the things that are meaningful to me. And now that I've been doing it long enough, I see that my meaning really does resonate with other people. So I would say that my process is one of uncovering meaning. Well, actually, to be quite frank with you, that's a challenge, and the physical nature of painting is really a wonderful thing, and it's very healthy, and because of movement, because you use your whole body, and actually, that's one of the reasons I really always loved large paintings. However, I like small paintings also, and I like drawings, and I like digital, and so everything is different, and every different medium I approach differently. Of course, the physicality of making an etching or a woodcut is very different from drawing, and the same thing is true with digital art. A lot of that is because it's confined to a small space, the iPad Pro or a Wacom tablet. The screen is only so large. So you actually are informed by physicalness. So in a painting where I would make a brushstroke like that, which has a certain arc to it and has a certain amount of power to it, you actually, because I'm so familiar with it and I know it, then doing it in a miniature form is kind of the same thing. Of course, it doesn't make you feel as good, and it's not as much of a dance, and it's not choreographed in the same way, but it's an interesting thing. So yes, digital art is not as physical, but I like them both, and I continue to do both. Well, NFTs and Web3 has really changed the relationship of artists to collectors. But the reason for that has nothing to do with NFTs. It has nothing to do with artists, and it has nothing to do with collectors. It has to do more with the other way that artists work in the brick and mortar art world is very much controlled by the middleman. It's controlled by dealers and auction houses, which separate artists from collectors. So the separation is actually quite artificial. So I've met collectors from both the brick and mortar art world and collectors in the NFT world. They're both just as enthusiastic about art. They both want to know me. They both want to know my process. They're both just as friendly. So actually, it's not because of NFTs. It's not because the artists are different or because the collectors are different. It's because Web3 allows this to happen. That's what's really extraordinary about Web3. That's why we should all embrace it. It removes the middleman, and really the middleman offers nothing, because the kind of thing that the middleman pretends that he offers is the security of knowing. And actually, one of the great things about crypto art, crypto in general, is we each individually have the freedom to make our own decisions. We should all make a decision about what is good art and what's bad art, what we like, what we don't like. Really, there is nothing objective about art. So everybody's entitled to support the artist they want. Everybody's entitled to have their own opinion. And there's nothing to say their opinion is worth more or less than anyone else. That being said, I don't understand, I never have understood where the authority from that dealers presume to have comes from. They certainly don't have a better education than anybody. They certainly aren't trained for the job. They're certainly not licensed in any way. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just nonsense. I started doing digital art in the 1990s. I was very, very excited the moment I got a computer and I saw the potential and the possibilities. In fact, I tried to sell it in the 90s, but there was just no marketplace for it. So it was very natural, once I found out what an NFT was, to get into it. Now, not only was it natural, but it offered me a lot of potentially new forms of expression. So I could create something new, or I could create something new from old work. I could take an old work of mine and animate it. I could take an old work of mine and change it. So this was extraordinary. The potential is amazing. Now, what do I say about artists who are reluctant to get in? I think they're fools. I just don't understand it. I never understood for one moment why artists say no to any potential tool for creation. So as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people are very lazy. The learning curve is not that difficult. And actually, you can go at your own pace. So I don't really understand barriers to going into NFTs. I do think NFTs and Web3 are the way of the future. I also think it's not going to kill physicals. It's not going to end oil painting. It's not going to end frescoes. It's not going to end lithographs. It's not going to end anything. We can do a lot of things. Web3 allows us to do a lot of things, old and new, and present them to the whole wide world. Why would anyone not do that? It's beyond me. Well, I do think art is a continuum, and I don't think that's such an unusual idea. So, as an artist, I do feel connected to the past, and I explore lots and lots of artists. But actually, I've come to realize that science is a continuum, that medicine is a continuum. So, it's not such an unusual idea. Every single doctor that I've known as a friend has really related to me about the history of medicine and the history of science. The same is true with every scientist I've known. We all stand on the backs of giants. Now, as far as art is concerned, what came before me and what comes before any artist is actually fascinating and interesting. And I think it's natural for artists to explore art history. The way I did it, I didn't go to school, so it's true that I'm self-educated, But, self-education is not such a mysterious thing. I went to museums all the time. I looked at everything. I looked at art books. I studied art books. I studied art in museums all over the world. So many different forms of expression throughout history talk to me, so many different artists, and we live really in a golden age of publishing. It's really extraordinary, especially now with the web. You can see anything. You can look at anything. So acquiring a real beautiful education in art history is something that's accessible to all now, and I highly encourage artists to do that. I also think it's great to understand where you come from, what lineage you're part of. Some of that is very, very personal. If you read art history, then traditions were passed down from artist to artist. Some of that is true still today. I've met really great artists from the past that I admired. I believe that on some level, when you meet somebody that is a profound precursor of your tradition, that the torch is passed in some way. There is some sort of beautiful conversation that happens. Part of that is just the excitement of meeting your hero. It's very, very beautiful, but I think it also happens in a transcendental way. I had that experience, a really profound experience without any drugs whatsoever. I really have to explain that, of meeting Rembrandt by just being in front of his painting and just getting such a profound, powerful impact of what he did. And part of it is because I understood it through paint. So my familiarity with actually painting was a language I understood and a language he was using for me. Maybe not for me personally, but certainly he and many artists have projected themselves into the future to talk to other artists through the language of paint. And I believe this is always part of being an artist. I didn't address community, and I'd like to address that because throughout history and for a great deal of my career, I worked in isolation. And many artists work in isolation. And part of that just simply is communication technology. If you were an artist, for example, in Iowa, you didn't really have that many friends. Of course, it was different in New York City for me, and probably in all of the great centers of culture, whether it's Rome or Paris. You do, as an artist, have a lot of options, but of course, it's limited to meeting those artists in a space at a specific time. Now with Web3, with the kind of technology we have, we can communicate with artists all over the world. This is really an extraordinary aspect of NFTs that I embrace. I love crypto Twitter. I'm on it every day. I communicate with a lot of artists. For the most part, the really extraordinary thing in crypto Twitter is that we are a community, and that most artists, perhaps some of the most famous artists, don't do that. That's their problem if they see themselves above other artists and they don't really talk to artists. I certainly talk to everybody. I believe that that's an extraordinary aspect of Web3, and I don't think any one artist is better than another artist. We're all doing the same thing, expressing ourselves, trying to understand ourselves. It's really great to have brothers and sisters in this and really communicate. I don't believe there should be competition among artists. It's a fraudulent state mentality. It's a fraudulent state of mind. This was something that actually was manipulated by the art market There's no need for that in Web3. So I sincerely believe we can all embrace each other without competition, learn from each other, and it's a really, really beautiful thing. Yes, I do think about my legacy because I'm 69 years old. That's very young, 69 years young. But of course, life is too short. Life is finite. I love life, and this is something that I've always been faced with. Having come from a family that experienced trauma and death very, very early on, I was always aware of the finite nature of life and always loving life. So, always regretting that there is an end to this. So, I do think of my legacy, and part of being an artist is trying to create something that is genuinely me, that goes to the future, that is alive, that people can relate to and feel, and there is a relationship that happens. So perhaps I won't be able to feel this past my lifetime. This, I think, is really quite unfortunate because I enjoy the connection, but I create something that's still able to to connect for the future. I believe that life is precious, and I think we should all embrace it and its potential to actually propel us forever into infinite space. Although that sounds a little crazy, it's really what we're here to do: connect and go on infinitely. Let's go.